You're listening to the Talent Therapy Podcast. Here, you'll find discussions around recruiting trends and best practices with talent acquisition leaders in the biotechnology and pharmaceutical industries so that you and your team are informed and up to date in an ever-evolving space. And now, here's your host, Chris Tamburini.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's edition of Talent Therapy. I'm your host, Chris Tamburini, and today we have Becky Schaufus of ElevateBio. Becky comes to us with over a decade of recruiting experience, both from the agency side and also from the corporate side. So I'll let Becky introduce herself.
Yeah, my name is Becky Schaufus. I, like Chris mentioned, have 100 years in the industry here within talent acquisition, both on agency and internal talent sides of things, and biotech, med device, tech development, so across the gamut. But I'm excited to talk to you, my friend.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of conversations over the years, and I'm happy we can put it in this medium. So Becky, let's talk about, and I actually don't even know if I know this, even though we've known each other for a while, but how did you initially get into talent acquisition and recruiting? What was kind of your first step?
It was just by chance. I did not plan it. I can't take credit for this elaborate plan or scheme or thought process to get into recruiting and TA. Back in, I think it was like 2008 when we were, experiencing recession, I got laid off from a pharmaceutical sales job that I had lived in Massachusetts my entire life, went to college here, grew up here, and just decided to move and try something different. So I had a lot of friends down in Charlotte, North Carolina. So decided to move down there and literally took, the first job I could so I could make some money. And that happened to be within this wonderful small recruiting agency called Collabra. And that's how I got my foot in the door with recruiting. It just happened to be by chance and down in North Carolina.
Interesting. I actually did not know that. And so you actually, you moved your whole life down to North Carolina from Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And just,
yeah.
Did you move for that job, or did you move down there for different reasons and get the job?
I just moved down there for like a life change. When I got laid off from pharmaceutical sales, I said, probably the time to switch it up if I wanted to try something different. I had no ties here besides my family and whatnot, but no family or anything at the time. So just decided to relocate down there. When I got down there, I started, putting some feelers out for jobs, and this is where I ended up being. And I started off more on like the candidate experience onboarding side of things, and then slowly made my way into, the recruiting and account management side at that company. It was specific to financial services. So Charlotte is like the hub of, banking and whatnot down there. And yeah, I actually figured out I really enjoyed it.
Nice.
So all by chance.
That seems to be the case with most people who end up in recruiting.
Yeah.
I have a similar story. I ended up in recruiting by total mistake, but I'm happy I did. And so I went to school for the life sciences. I had like a biotech degree, and I decided like my junior year, I did not want to work in a laboratory, which limits your options when that's, your major as a biotech person. And then I said, let me try a sales. So I did like an internship doing sales. So I started looking for sales jobs, and I was interviewing for all sorts of stuff. And then out of the blue, I got this email or this call from a recruiter at a recruiting agency, and he said, hey, listen, are you interested in being an entry-level recruiter for the biotech field? And I said, yeah, actually, that sounds kind of interesting. And then, the rest is history, and it's been my whole career since. So it seems to be common that most people end up in recruiting kind of on a whim.
By accident. Yeah. It's so interesting, though. I feel like I've noticed that change. I feel like I'm going to age us, I'll just age myself. I won't age you, but like
Fine.
people like back in our day, like when we were getting into recruiting, it was all by chance, right? Or like someone saying, yeah, I took this job. It was my first job out of college, or like, I just happened to like, bump into these people or whatever it was. But now I feel like it's an actual profession that people are looking to get into, right? Which is like and I know that sounds weird, but like more so you'd hear of it being happenstance and like by chance that someone got into recruiting like back in the day. And now it's like a really, targeted industry for people to get into. I feel like the tides have definitely turned over the last like decade plus, right?
Yeah.
Cool. It's good to see.
It is good to see. So I'm interested. How have you seen that? Because I don't know that I've seen that firsthand, but I'm kind of curious. What experience have you had, and also why do you think that's happened? Because that to me is an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, I think I see it more so on the internal recruiting side of things. Now, I don't have as much exposure to agency anymore, on their end of it, but I see it from the internal side of things where it's a branch of the people and culture community now that people are getting exposed to, and especially in this location that we're in, this biotech hub of Massachusetts, right? I think it's really kind of industry driven where there are so many jobs and so many opportunities because of the location that we're in, that people are really kind of more familiar with getting calls from recruiters or people from internal teams reaching out and doing some direct communication and whatnot. But I see it more on the internal side of things for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when you put it like that, it makes sense because specifically the Boston area and specifically biotech and life sciences has taken on almost what I think tech used to be maybe 10 or 15 years ago, right? So it's kind of got this whole other, we'll call it swag to it, which is interesting, right?
Yeah, no, totally. And I think even from like the tech, because you're right, like this is like the IT, right? Like the tech a decade ago, like now this is the hot industry. And even getting into like tech dev or something here within biotech, like there's just so many options. So I feel like from a TA side of things, from like a people side of things, there's a different field to the job now, right? It's not just, people would always back in the day, call us the headhunters, right? And that would drive me nuts. It's not just like that mentality, oh, they're just like a headhunter trying to like, make money, put me somewhere. And there's a different vibe to like talent community at this point. At least I feel like.
Yeah, I agree. And, this has come up lately, and I'm sure you're very involved in it, and I think we can talk more about this, is it seems that there's a much more of a marketing component to it now than there used to be, or also called employer branding. Like you said, I think traditionally when people think of recruiters, whether it's on the agency side or on the corporate side, they think of, a headhunter. And I think that's obviously shifted based on what we just talked about, but there's so much more to recruiting now than just finding a resume, picking up the phone, making a call, trying to get the person to talk to you and see if they're interested in a job, and then screening them out for their skill sets, right? That's very fundamental, basic recruiting 101, but it's shifted. You're right. I think you've been involved in this, but I'm curious to hear what your take is on how much marketing and how much employer branding has become part of your talent acquisition strategy from the places you've worked. And you could probably take us through a couple of different progressions of it, right?
Yeah.
'Cause you did work at the agency, and then you moved to corporate, but you've been in corporate for a while, and you've probably seen it become more and more entwined. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
It has been different over the course of time. I keep feeling like the phrases I'm using make me sound like I'm ancient or something, but over the course of time, it's really changed. It was a different approach in agency. I had to approach it differently, right? I've found more of a connection to the marketing piece of it internally, and now I think you even have like employment branding and talent branding. There's So there's so much outreach that happens that are like, okay, how do we want to, from an employee branding perspective, how do we want to like market, hey, this is what it's like to be an employee here. This is how we treat our people. This is how they feel about working here. But then there's like talent branding, which is attraction. Hey, like, look at us. This is, what we stand for. This is what you'd be getting by like considering an opportunity here, right? Now there's just these different types of branding. So when you think about like talent branding, for me, it's so important. Like you're saying, it's so important, and it's such a big factor in our industry now because, one, even currently, the market is completely at the bay of the external parties, right? Like by the candidates, by the people. It's not dictated by the corporations or the companies.
Yeah.
And they are saying, okay, this is what's important to me. Even with, unfortunately, all of the layoffs and things of that nature that are happening, especially in biotech right now, the demand for talent is so high, right? I still feel like we have to do our best to be as attractive as possible to get the best talent. And, I think it comes from people saying, this is what is important to me now, right? We've been through this pandemic where I think completely, and I guess this is just for me, I'll speak just for myself, completely changed the vision of how we operate, both from like a tactical perspective, but also like what's important to us, right? So no longer are the days in my mind that I can say, hey, this is a really great place to work. You only have to work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and we'll give you, X amount of dollars. And that's good, right? Like we have to talk about flexibility. We have to talk about how we treat our people, like the diversity, equity, and inclusion, tactic that is like ingrained in our values, right, as a company and how we operate. But those are the pieces that we're putting out there from a branding perspective. Like that's a human piece of it.
Yeah.
So like when I think about talent branding, it's actually like humanizing the job again, right? Like humanizing our function again, not being so tactical about it.
Yeah, man. So you actually just said something where you started off saying something that I didn't realize, and how you separate it in two different areas: employee branding, which obviously helps bring in new talent because you're getting testimonials from people that work there, and then talent branding, which is more of just selling what you can offer as a company from a culture perspective. And you're right. I think it's really challenging because we work in such a technical field where you have all these very, very hardcore technical requirements or scientific requirements, but then you also have these cultural requirements which are probably just as important. And so, how would you break that down? Like technical versus kind of cultural. And then I want to ask you more about the employee branding and the talent branding piece as well.
So technical versus cultural, I feel like is always like a tactical versus non-tactical topic, right? So for me, it depends on the role itself and what's important to the hiring manager and the candidate, right? Sometimes, especially in our industry, people are very technical, and maybe from a culture perspective, they're and they're not mind blowing or anything wild and crazy, and it's easy. But I think also when you're looking at cultural, it's like not just what we stand for as a company and fitting in with that. It's like, what's a good cultural add to the team, right? Like what's a good cultural balance to the team? So if you had a bunch of people, Chris, like you and I on a team, I mean, one thing, I think people lose their minds, right? Because we would never be quiet and probably just be joking around the whole time. But, that would probably be good to have someone really like detail oriented that can bring us down to, put our feet back on the ground and maybe a little bit more introverted, right? So that would be a great cultural add. So I think, the technical pieces are really important, but I think from a culture standpoint, you have to know who the team is and then have a good understanding on how to see like what potentially could be a good cultural add and like team add from that perspective.
Yeah, that's a good point. You have to look at what's the current landscape, and then how can we modify the landscape so that we don't have all the same type of person, right? Because if you have
exactly,
that diversity from a personality standpoint is really important. I could see that.
And it's just like, of course you have to have someone that can technically do a job, right? They have to be able to technically do a job. I think for us, for me, for my team, I think our way of thinking is starting to shift where it's like, okay, maybe do you need to have a 4-year degree? Probably not. Like, could you have other kinds of experience that allow you to bring like a different spectrum of perspective to the role and how you approach the role and how you got there? Yeah, right? Because otherwise we're just going to be recycling the same talent pool over and over again, right? And seeing who can like spend the most and pay someone the most to give someone a couple extra bucks to bring them over, to another position. So one, it's like technically let's start opening our minds a little bit about different potential opportunities for us to bring different technically qualified people into a role. But then, like, from a cultural add perspective, let's kind of broaden that too, right? So that means like going into different geographical locations or, just like expanding the way that we look at fulfilling the need a bit differently.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's probably the second or third time that's come up in the last few months for me, is bringing in people who maybe don't have a 4-year degree, because I think in biotech it's been almost or is really a prerequisite to getting in the door.
Mm-hmm.
But I think because there's such a high demand, or there will be such a high demand for additional talent, well, how much bandwidth and how much emphasis do companies want to put on training or developing some of that talent that doesn't have a 4-year degree? Because let's be honest. There's plenty of jobs where you have a degree and you don't need it. I.e.,
I don't need mine. I don't use mine.
Yeah,
I'm not an exercise physiologist to the best of my knowledge, right? Like, so I'm not sure why I needed that. And that's, there's so many other programs out there that can enable and train someone. Like ElevateBio does a really great program. Year Up does a really great program. There's ways to like use interns and different tech schools and have them come in and do internships so that you can train them on, on your way, quote unquote, of doing processes, right? So there's a lot of different avenues that you can go down. And I think the more that we explore that, one, we're going to grow our talent pool here locally by either bringing people in and or utilizing our local talent. But then also, we're just going to be creating a different type of employee and bringing a different kind of view and perspective and lived experiences into our companies, our teams. And I think that will be really beneficial for a lot of reasons.
So I guess internally at ElevateBio and maybe some other companies you've worked, have you guys addressed like formally putting a program in place to cultivate some of that non-degreed or diverse talent that maybe hasn't been in the past? Or is that something that's on the horizon? Or is it something that you're relying on external partners to kind of cultivate that talent? What is, or what might be the strategy in the future for bringing on those additional individuals?
Yeah, no. So I think, I can speak to my experience right now, and then also what I think could be valuable moving forward, not just at Elevate, but, in the industry. So we're just starting to explore relationships with the external parties that provide, this training and services for new employees to get into the industry. Because I think, first of all, our business model, like we're just not mature enough as a company. We're still developing and whatnot. And I think the great news that we've had come out through press releases over the past few weeks, there could be an opportunity for us to do a lot of great work with these external parties to get some new talent in and different geographical locations, including here in Massachusetts. But I think parties like Europe and the services that ElevateBio has created and training programs are really helpful for us internally to see the value add and how we would want to do something like this and run it as an internal program, right? Because it's not just bringing in people and training them. We have to think about the resources that we would need, right? So from space perspective, from an actual, resourcing on the internal side of things to provide a good experience for these people as they're being trained, the education side of it, right? So there's a lot of different factors to think about internally. So I think using some of the external services is probably the better route to figure out what works for you, what doesn't, how many people do you bring in at a time? What are the best skill sets to target this for? Is it, manufacturing? Is it process development? Is it quality control? What does that look like? And what's the best use for those types of services?
I love it.
Kind of like trial and error,
Yeah. No, it's going to be interesting because that strategy is going to have to really be part of the fabric of the growth of biotech locally, and not just locally. I think throughout the entire country, because there clearly is. I mean, just in the last decade, right? The amount of people in biotech has doubled, and it's expected to grow by another 50 to 100% over the next 5 to 10 years. So in order for that to happen, there's got to be some robust training and development resources. Otherwise, it's going to go stagnant, and people and companies aren't going to be able to accomplish their goals. So it's going to be interesting. And I think part of the beauty of being in a growing industry is that there's a lot of creativity that occurs. So you and I, I'm sure, will be part of it some way, somehow. You definitely will be.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think we'd both be bored.
Well, exactly. We would just be headhunting, right?
I know. Gosh.
So yeah, I want to circle back to some things we talked about a few minutes ago: the employee branding and the talent branding. And so, in your role, you're heading up talent acquisition for ElevateBio, which is growing rapidly. And I'm sure there's a lot of actual recruiting that happens underneath you, right? That you're getting applicants, you're getting referrals, you're bringing them through the process. There's a whole operational piece, right? And so that stuff, I think you obviously have to get involved in. But then there's some of the other more creative stuff, like you just talked about the talent branding and the employee branding. So, when as you're building out your function there, how much time and effort are you spending on talent branding and employee branding? And then how much collaboration are you doing with other groups to, I guess, enhance those? Because these are things to me that are, like you said, they're newer, right? They didn't necessarily exist, or there wasn't as much emphasis on them, say, 5 to 10 years ago. But now it's like you have to have this in order to be a thriving company. So I'm curious, how much time are you spending there, and what types of functions and collaborations are you doing?
When you ask about collaborations and teams I'm working with, do you mean externally or internally, within the company, or both? Does it matter?
Well, I was actually referring to it internally, but now that you mention it, maybe there's some external partners you work with too. So both. Okay,
cool. So I guess from a time perspective and how I think about the talent branding, for me it was almost non-existent when I first started at Elevate, because what I think we wanted to do as a team first was stand up a process that was efficient, that could add value to both the business internally, but also to the candidates that were going through the process as well, right? So there was a lot more, and still is. I mean, literally just had a meeting about this, a team meeting about this last week, where we just talked about like who we are, what do we want to stand for, like how can we take that then and implement it into our day-to-day processes and how we execute the tactical portion of recruiting, right? And I think until you figure that out, then only are you able to do your talent branding effectively, because otherwise it just looks like something else that someone's going to scroll past on LinkedIn, right? I mean, I'm just being honest, right?
No,
and I think
we want.
Yeah, like you're like, oh great, another sappy post or another boring corporate picture, right? Like that's where my mind goes, and I scroll past those. But
Do you do that photos?
I mean, I can't do it. I just can't. Like everyone posing by a chalkboard or so. People don't use chalkboards anymore, whatever it is, whiteboard. Or I just used this board at our office the other day that literally was like a computer screen. It completely blew my mind. Anyways, but so who do we want to be? And I think if we start to project and be that team and be those people, then the talent branding comes more naturally and people will pay more attention to it because it's actually genuine, right? So for me, like the talent branding isn't just about the LinkedIn. I use that as an example. LinkedIn is a wonderful tool. But it's okay if we're going to post something on LinkedIn, like what would you stop and read, right? What would you stop and look at, if I was going to a conference, like we have, the ISPE product show event tomorrow at Gillette. We're at booth C21. I know this isn't going to be posted until later, but come check us out next year. We'll be there too. But, we have that, like, that's talent branding, right? Like who do we want to be when we show up there? Do we want to be there and sitting in our chairs and handing out flyers? No, totally. That's just not who we are, right? So for us, like now that we have an identity as a team and what we stand for and how we want to treat people, it's easier and more impactful for us to do our talent branding. So I keep talking. I don't know if you want me to stop, but like I could talk about this forever here.
No, this is actually really interesting for me because I think it's so important. And, a lot of my work, really all of my work has been on the agency side. And so it's not really up to me to do talent branding. It's up to me to do different, more tactical things. But the candidates I work with are very interested in what offering the employer is bringing to the table and what's gone on there from a cultural perspective. And so it all ties in.
And then you can feel good about it, right? If you're someone that's worked closely with you for, 100 years, I would then want to, and even if I didn't know you, right? And hopefully this is the experience people have working with me, but like, I would want you to feel excited and good knowing that the candidates that you're presenting to me would be at a good place and in good hands, right?
Of course.
And that, whatever the outcome is of that specific instance, it would be met with transparency and, honesty and, whether it's good, bad, indifferent. I think that's kind of my approach to recruiting. My team's approach will be as honest and transparent as possible. And so whether you're an agency or, at internal, I think it does matter because hopefully, like what we're bringing to the table is actually what is in existence, right? And I'm not saying we're going to get it right every time. I'll be honest there too. We're wrong, sure. Like this, we messed this up. Man, because that's just life, right? But if you don't say that, then that's where I find like there's the dishonesty, or like if you don't know something, or if you're like, I don't know if you're going to be a fit for this, like I really don't, and this is why, right? But we could try, right? Like for me, that's it, like it brings you back to what I said earlier, like that human part of it. Like people don't want BS anymore. Like there's just no time for it. There's no energy for it, right?
It's really refreshing to hear that, and I'm not surprised hearing that from you. But I think you and I probably would take similar approaches to working with candidates and hiring managers. But the authenticity piece and talking about the strengths and the weaknesses of whether it's the candidate or the company or the hiring manager, I think putting it all out there is going to create a much better experience for everybody because let's be honest,
Totally.
nothing is perfect. There is no perfect match made in candidate heaven. It just doesn't work, or recruiting heaven rather.
Mhm.
And so if you're
Mhm.
coming out there and if I'm presenting to a candidate and saying, here's the deal with ABC company, here's what's really good, here's what isn't so good, here's where they're at, here's where they're lacking, and here's where you might be able to impact them. And if you're not up for that, hey, that's too bad, but it's also totally fine because now we know and we didn't have you take this job and 3 months later you're having, buyer's remorse or, a year
No,
later,
yeah.
you're right. So it's just better to
We're
get that
doing this
stuff.
again in 6 months. Yeah, no, exactly. And I think like, does it work right every time? No, right? We're all in this dream world if we think that it does. But you try to do the right thing. I think that's like what it comes back to. And I start all of my calls, whether it be with like, an entry level person or an executive, and say the same thing. It's like, this is an open conversation. You should get as much out of it as I do, but I'm going to be really transparent. Are you cool with that? Right? Like, so if the transparency like gets you sometimes or shocks you or takes you by back, like if I'm saying, hey, I don't know like what it's going to look like a year from now for us, right? We're in this like wild growth stage. So what we create as processes and procedure internally now may look different a year from now. So if you're not the type that likes to create, then recreate, then optimize, then pivot, then adjust, and then this may not be the place for you, right? So I
Yeah.
think, some people thrive in that environment and some people don't. And that's totally fine. Like, that's absolutely fine if that's not for you, because we need people like you too, right? But this just may not be the best route. So I think it's just being as open and honest as possible so that they can make a good decision for their lives, again, because you're human and it's a really important part of your life, your job, right? But also that we can make a good decision for us as well, right? There has to be expectation on our end from a candidate side, right? From a technical side, getting a job done. This is a business, these are businesses in general. But there's both pieces that we have to take into consideration, right? Like, I don't know. I feel like now I'm rambling on the subject, but like I get kind of like heated about this kind of stuff.
No, listen, Becky,
passionate again. I'm like just heated.
no, I love this because I will say, throughout my recruiting career, and I think throughout yours, you've probably seen a shift, right? And the shift is maybe when you started recruiting, or around the time you and I started recruiting, recruiters were kind of supposed to be salespeople, and maybe there was a little bit of a stigma to recruiters where they're salespeople and they're only going to tell you the good things you want to hear. And I think we were almost trained that way, right? And I do think there's been an evolution. And to me, it's like there's so much less headaches. I sleep better at night. I feel better about myself. My clients feel better. My candidates feel better. And I think they honestly appreciate it when
Chris,
you're putting everything out there. And the fact that you and your company is taking that approach, I don't think you're the only one that's doing it. I just think it just makes so much more sense to be so authentic and open because what is the point of surprising somebody, especially when it comes to something as big as, like you said earlier, their career, where they're spending multiple hours away from their family and focusing on stuff just to be blindsided, right?
No, and Chris, I'm so glad you said that because I honestly felt such a disconnect, like when I was on the agency side, right? I knew I liked the job, but I just like wasn't feeling like I was like operating in the right way, right? Like I didn't feel like I was going with my gut most of the time, which is like a really, just going to say it. I know I'm being recorded. It's a shitty feeling, if you feel like you're not doing the right thing all the time because you're yeah, I can sell someone, but do I really want to sell someone on a job that maybe they don't know if they want to take, right? So like that's why I feel like the internal side of things, when I got onto the corporate side, the internal side, I was able to like get back to that like good place of like, hey, I'm not going to sell you to work here because like I don't want to have to do that, right? I don't want to have to tell you why like all these great things that you know what, I think you should be able to, with the information hopefully I could provide, make your own decision on if this is something that works for you, and we'll do the same, you know.
Yeah.
But it's like bringing it back to that like human piece of it. I just honestly just kind of the way I roll. I feel that way about myself at this point. It's like I am who I am. I can't believe sometimes, you know, I'm heading up this talent function because it's like I'm just this person, you know, this like normal person that I'm going to talk to you, whoever you are, like you've been my best friend for 20 years. And, you know, I just am who I am. But I think that's also why I can get the best out of people sometimes too, meaning candidates and my team, you know, because if it's not for you, it's not for you. Guess what? There'll be something else that comes up, whether it's here at this company, at another company. You know, like I'm always a big fan of like doing what's best for you. And I think to do that, you need to have someone that's giving you like really honest, transparent information.
Well, that is exactly why you're in the role you're in, is for that reason, right? That's why. I mean, obviously, whoever identified that in you at ElevateBio or whatever other place you used to work, or places you used to work, I mean, that makes sense. And I do think that makes the best, from my opinion, the best kind of recruiter, because you're really facilitating someone's decision as opposed to selling them on a decision, and you're helping them to see every side of the coin, or every side that you know exists of the coin, and you're not pressuring anyone. You're just presenting and facilitating, and is always going to be part of recruiting and talent acquisition. And I'm sure there's always going to be the salesy and the transactional recruiters who are going to do just fine, but I do think the candidate experience in the long run better suited towards people like yourself.
And it's a consultative partnership. That's what I think about it in my mind. Not just to the business. I'm going to give the business the same exact, you can sell anybody that works with me on this side, right? I'm going to give them the same exact transparency and honest opinion all the time. Again, is it always right? No. You know, like I tend to tell my husband I'm always right, but I know I'm not, you know. But then the same thing on the candidate side as well. I'm going to give you like a consultative partnership. Like if you're thinking, oh, okay, well, I have this, but I have this, you know, counter offer at my current company. You think I'm going to let that slide? No, I'm going to tell you what typically happens with that. Like I'm going to be honest. Say, why are you talking to me if things are so wonderful right now for you, right? Like what is the real like root of the problem? And I mean, I think your podcast name is perfect. It's like TA therapy, right?
Yeah.
Therapy session.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And, you know, I will say this kind of goes back to one of the things that I think you and I discussed and learned way back when we started working together. And there was this whole concept, which is I think related to what we're talking about now, is when you're working with a candidate, you want to really almost talk them out of the role to make sure that they're actually bought into what they're trying to do. And you really want to hear from them why they want to take the job. So that way, you know that they've made their own mind up and you're not making it up for them. Yeah. So
I do. I believe that. But then I also think too that like candidates, the employee market is really smart on what we want to hear. Right. So again, if you get into like this salesy tactical dialogue, right? Why do you want to work here? So, you know, what do you feel like you can contribute? Like, this is what I'm looking for, blah, 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 right? Oh my gosh, it's like pre-rehearsed and everyone knows exactly what they want to say and they probably wrote the notes down and they're probably going to read them and, you know, but so if it's just like an open conversation about what's important, like what's happening, why are you even talking to me? Like let's just talk like people. I find they'll either come through with more honesty, right, to themselves and to you, but you're going to get like way more value out of that. Whether it's that you both decide like, hey, great connection, great experience, really would be wonderful moving forward, but this isn't it, right? So let's stay connected. Or like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I can't wait to talk to the hiring manager about you. I'm going to get off the phone and like call them right away, or whatever that is, like whatever
Yeah.
that is. I feel like for me, at least, those kind of conversations make a more like valuable impact to the actual recruiting process.
And you're right. And I think what I was trying to get at is what we're talking about right now is kind of almost the evolution of talking the candidate out of the job, right? Because I think it used to be like, oh, talk to the candidate out of the job. And that is like a sales tactic in a way, right? But you're right. The market is so educated, and we're dealing with a lot of smart people. They're going to be able to kind of sift through that. But the evolution of that is, okay, well, I'm not going to sell you too hard.
You're right.
I'm not going to take it away. Let's just have an open conversation. I want to know the truth. You can be totally honest with me, because either way, things are going to go in the right direction for you and for the company. So let's just talk about it as it is.
And what do you like? Do you feel like on your side? Sorry, and now is it cool if I ask you a question?
Please.
Okay. I'm like, I don't know if this is supposed to just go.
Yeah, this is a conversation.
It's new for me. I don't really know what this is. But like, do you feel like on your end of things, being like a third party representative, right? I will not call you an agency. You're way more than that for me. But like a representative of these people, do you feel like those conversations typically are something like you're comfortable having given the knowledge that you have of these companies that you're working with? Or sometimes do you feel like it's a good way for you and the company to like combine like forces and have honest conversations with people? Like, how do you feel like your honest, transparent company like candidate needs conversations go, being like a representative of these companies and these candidates, right?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that I personally try to build a relationship with candidates, and the types of searches that I'm doing are usually longer, right? So they're senior level and executive searches.
Yeah.
So it's not like I have a 30-minute phone call with them and then I submit them and that's it. It's like, I talk to them for probably an hour before I even think about presenting them a couple different times. And then I'm meeting them along the way, and I'm building a relationship in order to have some of those honest conversations. And I think throughout that process, questions will come up from both ends, right? So I'll get a question we'll just focus on the candidate right now. And the candidate might ask me something, and I'll give them as much information as I have. But if I don't know, I'll be like, listen, that's a really good point. I don't have the answer to that right now. So the best way is either, number one, I can follow up with the hiring manager or one of the representatives I'm working with at the company and get a feel for that and circle back with you. Or you can talk to the hiring manager yourself, or the HR person or the TA person yourself, and be able to sift that out, because I don't want to mislead you, right? So I try to be as honest whether I do or don't know, and I'll give them the like we said earlier, I'll give them kind of the challenges too. I'll go, listen, this role needs somebody who's going to be flexible, because the process when you get there now is going to look 180 degrees different than a year from now, right? So in a lot of the companies I work with are smaller, so that's a pretty typical thing. And so what I find is if you're coming from a large company, you either want that, right? You want to have that lack of structure so you can build it out yourself, or you don't want it at all and you want to stay with a large company, and that's totally fine. It's just a different candidates.
Yeah.
So does that answer your question?
No, I was just,
or part of it
does. I was just, no, it does. I was just kind of curious because if those conversations look different for you now, because I love that if you say you don't know something, right? Like, but I was just more curious. I find like, because you have a really great memory. You do, and like your approach to people is really great, and I'm surprised because I can't remember generally like 5 minutes ago what I did. But like, for example, you had spoken to some people at Elevate before, and you were there and they recognized you right away, right? And you remembered fun facts or like funny facts about, conversations that maybe you had like, a year ago or 2 years ago or whatever it is at this point. And, I think those things about you, and this is why I was asking this specific question, but those things about you, when you're then able to remember those pieces, whether they're funny, technical, professional, whatever it is, and being able to give that back to candidates, that's the stuff that I think that we are also like doing when we're representing our company. So I think, that's your approach, I just find really great in that manner, right? But I was just curious how you felt the representation of the companies and candidates are when you have those conversations. That's all.
Yeah, no.
Sorry, my interview is over now. Over now, Chris. Just, okay?
All right. Well, I appreciate the kind words, and the questions were fantastic.
Lovely. Good. I'll be getting my fill.
Perfect. But, I mean, listen, I try to get really deep and really honest into the ground level with each candidate, and that takes time, right? That's part of the reason why I switched from placing contractors versus going to executive and senior level people. Not to say these conversations haven't happened with contractors, but I think there's more of an emphasis. The more, I guess, the larger the role is, the more higher up the role is, the more these things come into play. And I actually really like that, getting deep with the candidate and building relationships with the candidate. And whatever way it ends up is fine, because I think that's part of the process. And so getting to the ground floor with candidate and the client, right, I think is really, really important. And like we said earlier, hey, maybe it's not going to work out every time, but at least we got to the bottom of it and we figured out ahead of time whether or not it's going to be a good fit.
No, and I think that's reflective of, I guess this podcast is really about you and I just hyping each other up, but I think that's reflective of now like the business you've been able to build yourself, right? Because, and I always say to my team, I feel like I know that person. I feel like I know that person whenever we have someone come across our desk, because I think when you approach things in this way, whether it's the right position you're talking to them for in that instance or not, just having that connection. Now, this is a really small, tight-knit industry, right? Even though it's grown to be extremely big and massive here, but it's a tight-knit industry, and you'll have all of these connections moving forward that are helpful, whether it's just to bounce ideas off of, to say, no, I don't have a need for this person, but I know, Abby over at TCR Squared, has a need. Like, it's just, that's what, I think that's like the benefit of approaching the work in the way that you do, right?
I appreciate that. So, I want to pivot here for a minute, because there's a couple of things I wanted to get your take on. And,
cool.
So this is actually related to what we've been talking about, but
okay.
I'm kind of curious a little bit about your actual experience at ElevateBio building out the team. And so when you got there, it wasn't ultra structured, but they tasked you with really structuring that team. And so I'm kind of curious what your experience has been to be able to successfully build out the current TA team at ElevateBio. And I know it's evolving and it's growing. So maybe you can tell me about that from both a tactical and maybe a cultural perspective, how you've been able to do that.
It was super easy. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I just had to laugh for a second. So this was my first time building a team, right? And building out a function. And I was really, really lucky. There was a team in existence when I got there. But we were looking to really kind of optimize the way that we were working, both with our candidates and with the business. So these wonderful people here kind of bared with me as I literally came in and shook things up, from everything to the systems that we're using, the applicant tracking system, to what their individual jobs as, TA professionals looked like, to what the day-to-day responsibilities of someone in the recruiting chair was going to be, to how we operated and provided experiences to candidates. So coming into the role, like I was coming in super, super excited and wanted to do all of this stuff. I have all these great ideas and went in hot, right?
Yeah.
And that was eye-opening for me because what I learned in that moment, it was like really self-reflective. It was like, okay, I am not meeting the people where they are, right? I think to like build out this wonderful team, it was like, okay, stop, observe for a bit, learn a little bit, and then kind of move forward with step one, right? And I think it's providing enough time. I mean, I've been there for a year and a half or something like that now, right? So it's providing enough time to like do things in a way that are impactful and meaningful and feel like the changes are being made for like the better of the company and for like the candidate experience and the people on the TA team. So from a technical perspective, I really kind of recreated the recruiting process at Elevate and made it a bit more involved and consultative for the TA partners in the business together. And then, from, the perspective of culture on my team, I don't think I did anything, to be very honest.
Right.
I brought in a couple new people. I think that like what maybe I did for the culture was enable people to come into their own selves and their own confidence and their own light to feel like they were making super valuable contributions. And I think that now, I think I said earlier, we just had a team meeting on site last week, and I could not stop laughing. Like, I just love being in the room with those people. We just started laughing. We're talking about like who we want to be, not just in our company, but like to our industry. This group of people are just really freaking solid humans. And so like, even with, all the layoffs and things happening, and there's resume books floating around of all these impacted employees, like half of our meeting was taken up by them figuring out how can we help these people, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's not at Elevate. And for me, I think like them being enabled and confident in their own abilities is creating that culture for themselves and like, what do we stand for? So for me, I just feel like I'm there to like be the momager, like be the Kris Jenner. Yeah, be the Kris Jenner and like, hype them up, be their biggest cheerleader, but also tell them when we need some redirection,
Yeah.
And I think they've come into their own because of that. So yeah, we're not where, we want to be, but I think that's only because we see like how much more we're capable of moving forward. So it's small steps, both tactically and then from a culture perspective. I just feel like it's creating itself on its own, which is really cool.
Yeah, I love to hear that. And so you said a couple things that resonated, and the first was you said you came in hot because you had these ambitions, right? And you wanted to probably try to change up things. And you said, you know what, I'm Becky. I know what I'm doing. People to me, and it's gonna work, and we're gonna change this. And in 3 weeks' time, the process will be smooth. They'll respect me. Boom, it's gonna be done. And then you realize, and I'm just gonna do this to make you feel more comfortable. I'm gonna swear. Say, holy shit! Like it's not gonna happen, right? It's not gonna happen.
Oh man, I really screwed this up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's and I've been there. So I know firsthand, because you have to realize, this needs to be slowly done, and we have to really listen to them first, and then we got to find somewhere in the middle, and we have an ultimate goal to get to. And I think the second thing you said that hit me, which is you've empowered your people, and they've given them the ability and the freedom to kind of work the way they want to work, which ultimately, and this is such a tough thing when you're managing people, is to be able to just give them the reins and let them be confident, because maybe they're not going to do everything exactly the way you want it to, but they're going to work so much better and be so much happier if they feel confident and empowered. Now, once in a while, you're going to rein them in a little bit, right? But geez, like how good of a culture is that when everyone's feeling like themselves?
Yeah,
Better do
totally.
they work?
And like,
And how much? Yeah.
yeah, they're like that's the thing, right? So we're talking about all this candidate experience, employee experience. Like that's how I think about my team. You know, like I tell them, you know, I want you to take time off. When you take time off, if you start emailing me, I'm going to be pissed off, right? Or like if, you know, you have to go do something, go do it. If you have an idea, bring it to me, right? Like I'm not going to be monitoring. I'm not someone who cares about metrics to care about metrics. I care about metrics to make sure that we're like driving the right behaviors. To drive the right behaviors, you have to understand what you're doing and like doing it, right? So like if I tell you the way I do things, that's just a suggestion because you're going to flip it into the way that you do it, right? I don't want you to regurgitate like what I say because it's going to seem weird and inauthentic, you know? And I truly feel like, you know, something I've learned how to do because of other great leaders that I've worked for is just like help people recognize the good and the potential and the areas for improvement that they have without like feeling like they're going to be doing it alone, right?
Yeah.
And so when you do that, it trickles over, right? Like, and so when I say, you know, who do we stand for as a talent acquisition team at Elevate? Like, even if we figured it out, which I think we have like a good idea, we're just some really dope humans that are trying to do the right thing. I don't think like it's all going to come out the same, right? Like what I say is going to be different than what someone on my team says, but guess what? The values are going to be similar. I don't know. I truly feel like if you are comfortable and feel supported, then you're just going to like do the very best that you can, right? And that's how I feel here. I work for an amazing person, amazing woman, and I feel really empowered. And so that makes me want to feel my team to feel the same way.
I love that. I love hearing that. And it goes a long way.
Yeah, I'm gonna hype them up till the day I die. So it's my crew.
That's great. Oh,
yeah,
it's good to hear. And obviously, well, not obviously, but I'm assuming you've probably seen, and you alluded to this earlier, you've probably seen a difference in maybe how they behave or how they're showing up, or ultimately the results of what the team is able to achieve. Have you noticed a difference since you've been there? I mean, it's been, you said over a year, but tell me about that difference.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think both in the way that they approach their work with the business and the outreach to candidates and a different level of confidence they have in themselves, but also that the business and candidates have in them to make the right connections, right? But I just also think they have a different level of professional, you know, experience and professional maturity now being consultative partners, that their roles aren't just tactical and executionary, right? Like they're not just coming in and following orders provided by someone. This is somewhere that they are now more so the experts, right? So they're able to give sound advice in this space, because just like I don't know how to, you know, run a PCR, right, or do HPLC, is the same way that maybe someone in the lab may not know the best way to approach, you know, sourcing a passive candidate, right?
Yeah.
So I think just the team feeling a little bit more confident and involved in the why behind things, not just executing, has really like made their confidence just a little bit more, or I guess I said that wrong, but like made them a bit more confident in their role.
That's great.
And I guess I'm speaking for them too. I'm hoping this is the way that they feel, but this is how it feels for me, for them, you know?
Yeah. Well, you'll find out after they listen to this.
I know. I'll be like, okay, hard no, you know. They'll tell me too. Just don't you worry, they'll tell me.
Good. That feedback.
It's also the hard conversations too, right? Like I make it seem like it's been easy, not easy, but like it's been a wonderfully paved road, but it's been a lot of hard conversations too, and I think knowing that those conversations come from like the right place, and someone that actually really cares about you, and that's where it's coming from. When you hear that it's always hard to hear feedback or constructive feedback, right? Like everyone's saying, no, I love it, give me feedback, right? But when you hear it, you're like, oh crap, like, oh shoot, I did do that, or like, yeah, I do need to get better at that. Oh man,
Yeah,
but
it's definitely challenging.
it's a lot of, yeah. And so when you hear those pieces of feedback and they're coming from someone that actually wants to see you succeed, you take it a bit differently, right? So having those conversations, we've had a lot of those too, right? But I think that enables that like confidence and trust of like, all right, let's go back to the drawing board and like try this again, right? So
Yeah, I mean, geez, we could talk about that specifically, that thing with the feedback you talked about. We could talk about that for another hour and a half.
I know. I don't
So,
even know what time I'm like, has it been that long? Oh my God.
so there's two quick things I want to cover.
Mm-hmm.
We have some time here, and so the first thing is what are you seeing in the market today? So you're at a company right now that's been prospering, and we're currently in a volatile environment, and this happens in biotech and pharma all the time. There's ups and downs. But what are you seeing in the market today, and what do you kind of project for the future, specifically within biotech hiring, talent acquisition, or just biotech in general?
So two different questions, I guess. One, the industry. By no means am I an industry scientific expert, but this happens, right? And it goes in waves. And I think, we're at this point in time where we're seeing, a lot of companies downsizing and or, closing doors or shifting focus, which is really unfortunate, but it's happened before, right? It comes in waves. So I feel like from a cyclical perspective, it will come back up. And yes, we've been really fortunate, but, I also think our model lends to a bit more diversity in portfolio and capabilities. And, we're lucky that we don't just, have one asset that we're focusing on or, one target approach to things. Our hands are in a lot of buckets, and we operate in a disruptive manner to kind of like disrupt the norm here. So I think that approach has really been, helpful for us in this time. But that being said, from the like employee market, from the external market, the candidate market, with all the layoffs, I have not seen the demand for talent in so long, for such a long time, right? Like this has been months and months and months that the demand for people in this space has been greater than the supply. And I still feel, even though the market is dipping, the market itself is a candidate-driven market, 100%. And to be very honest, although it's it makes our jobs more challenging, right? I kind of hope it stays that way. Feels good. I don't know. Am I crazy for saying that?
No, it's the reason why your job exists is to bring people in.
Yeah, and I think I'd love to see a little bit more consistency around like titling and things of that nature, because I think because of the demand, we're seeing a lot of inconsistencies with title inflation and or just like really we're all kind of like drawing at strings saying, oh gosh, okay, what benefits are you offering? What are you doing? Bouncing ideas off of each other. I talk to my TA partners and HR partners all the time saying, oh my gosh, what are you guys doing for this or that, right? Just we're all trying to think of new creative approaches to attract people. But I think that just means like the people who are going to hopefully come join our companies actually really want to be there because they had so many other opportunities, right? And we are the ones that they chose, whoever that we is. So I hope it stays a candidate-driven market. I like to see it. Feels good. right? Rather than the business dictating things. I know that's the world we live in, but like it feels good a little bit. Humans.
Yeah. No,
Go humans. Go humans.
I see where you're coming from, and it's good that that's your perspective, because that is ultimately a healthy thing for our industry. And that's another thing, right? It's healthy, right? If it means that the industry is thriving and flourishing, and it's ultimate, it's a good thing for people and for companies. It's a good it's a problem, but it's a good problem to have. Another way to say it.
It's a good one. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
All right. Totally. So my last question for you, Miss Becky,
dun, dun, dun.
is what advice? What advice would you give to a young Becky Schaufus, or somebody who is just entering the TA or the recruiting field?
Probably the same, but what it looks like would be different for each person, right? Like, I think don't lose sight of who you are at the core and what you value, what's important to you, and follow that. I think we sparked a little bit of this conversation, right? Where back in the day, agency side of things with good intentions, I think I just wasn't doing exactly what I felt like was the right thing to do all the time, and that felt crappy,
Yeah.
And I think once I just followed my gut and followed what I wanted to do, I actually found a true, genuine love for what I'm doing right now, in the field that I'm in, and what I want to create here and who I want to be. If someone's saying, "Oh, have you met Becky over at ElevateBio?" I hope most people would say great things, "Oh, she was really normal," or really easy to talk to, or she told me this wasn't the best job for me, and that was cool, and we connected on LinkedIn after, and whatever. I just honestly want to do what feels right in the gut, and that would be my advice to someone. I think follow, especially where this is a people-driven profession. You're dealing with people's livelihoods in a lot of different manners, whether it's their career trajectory, their, livelihood from a compensation perspective, if there's any immigration pieces that are tied to it, just from a morality side of things. You're dealing with a lot of really big values for people. So be a good freaking person, try to do the right thing and follow your gut. That's my advice.
I love it. I wouldn't expect you to say anything different. That's perfect.
Good. Well, see, there's one person that's going to say something good when they think of me. Just when I paid you them. So
you didn't pay me at all. But awesome. Well, Becky, that's all we have for today. So I want to thank you for taking some time to talk about your experience and some of your successes and some of your strategies. And thank you very much.
No, you're the best, Chris. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to my friend for an hour and a half at the beginning of the day. No better way to start the day. I'm super proud of you. I really love watching what you've created over the past 12 years. I'll just put it out there, 12, 15 years, whatever it's been. But I'm proud of you. Thank you for having me on your podcast and for this TA therapy session.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the kind words, Becky.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Talent Therapy Podcast with Chris Tamburini. This show is for entertainment purposes only and is copywritten by Rana and Vance, LLC.